But we're early. No, is it not going to let me in until the starting time? Can you think of anything else we should do? I meant to make sure that we're broadcasting.
Put back on the. Why are you looking for something there?
No. What if I shut this link down and oh, here we go. There, it's on. There's a time lapse. It's a little disconcerting. Oh, hey, Aaron and Katara, is it? And Latoya.
Hello, guys.
You're just looking at my screen has a delayed image of our heads turned in a completely different directions, like a horror movie. It's like, ah. So anyway, welcome everyone. It's a couple minutes early.
Yeah, I just thought we'd come in and you guys can say hi to each other, and we're just working with this particular webinar platform. And as time goes on, we might even evolve to another one, but this one seems to work pretty well.
Right now I'm jamming some imaginary George Clinton. I was listening to a lot of George Clinton this afternoon to prepare. The homework was really hard for this.
Hey,
so grueling.
I'm seeing Layla and Denny and Tom and Scott and Jasmine and, oh my God, Trey and Cole Jack Pittman and just on and on and on. We've got a big group today. So yes, this is great. And I hope that you guys have been made friends with each other over on the Life Writing site at Facebook. That's why it's there. You know, we're just having an opportunity to share in some ways that we haven't before, and I am like I'm so happy and I'm so grateful to everyone who made this such a success, because it's turned into a huge success. Our biggest success ever because of the generosity of some of you guys. We've had about 20 scholarships that we were able to give to people. God bless you. That's what we wanted, is to create a community where we could do that. And just thank you so much.
You'll see me turning my head from side to side. It's not short attention span. I have another computer set up, and I'm seeing the delayed images of me, which are freaking me out.
Denny waves. I wave back to Denny. Hi there. I love you.
And I'll try to monitor the chat function, as you guys have already figured out. You can talk to each other, and that means you can also talk to us. So you type questions. There is a way to flag a comment as a question. Which...
Yeah, turn up the sound over here just for a second, just that I... Okay, great. Then you can turn the sound back down.
Yes.
We're just testing the tech. If you have any problems, you know, understand that there'll be replays. You're going to get links to a site that's going to be absolutely beautiful, where you'll be able to interact. And then, of course, there's Facebook. So we've got you guys covered three different ways.
So there's something called request to speak. I don't know if we'll use it. I think that's why you get that red arrow. What happens if you click on that?
Let me see what happens if I click on request to speak. There's one request to speak.
View it. And
from Tananarive. Do that was you.
So you'll say, Tananarive, what do you want? Why are you interrupting my lecture? You know, maybe we don't need to use request to speak. We will be monitoring the comments. So hopefully we'll see if you have questions. Don't worry if we can't get to your question immediately. We will try to scroll through and make sure.
Okay, let's see. Do we have another request to speak? We're still experimenting.
No, that's still me, so I can cancel my request now.
Okay, you can cancel your request. Yeah. Cancel that request.
So, all right, this is great. So we're 1 minute till showtime, folks.
Showtime!
Thank you all for coming. This is super exciting.
Yeah, it's like I said. Just a moment. You know, one of the things that I always do, 5 to 6 days a week. 7 days a week, if I'm feeling stressed out, is I'll stop and feel my heartbeat. If you get quiet enough and still enough, you can actually feel your heartbeat if you need some help by taking it at your pulse.
I do my pulse.
Yeah, pulse is good. Here, whatever. But by stopping and listening to your heartbeat, you're connecting with the source of love inside you. And those of us who are artists, who are empaths, who are trying to change the world, activists, you have to start by taking care of yourselves. So we will thread that in. So the thing we're doing is the ways to actually what this is about is changing the world, but we'll get to that.
And we're at the top of the hour. It is exactly 3 o'clock. Welcome to Afrofuturism, Dreams to Banish Nightmares. I am Tanana Reeve-Dew. Those of you, and
I am Stephen Barnes.
If you don't know me, I am an author. I've written or co-authored 12 books at least, including a civil rights memoir. I've won an NAACP Image Award, American Book Award, Lifetime Achievement Award from the in the fine arts from the Congressional Black Caucus, which is in the news lately, and it's resistance. So I'm excited.
If I didn't have such a healthy ego, this woman would absolutely intimidate me.
He's no slouch either, honey. Tell him how great you are. Don't be shy.
Okay. My name is Steve Barnes, and in this particular arena of my life, I've published about 30 novels. I've worked in television, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, Stargate, SG-1. And about 3 million words of fiction, taught at UCLA and USC, and lectured at Mensa and the Smithsonian Institute, and had a lot of fun with different things. And I've just reached the point in my life where I feel it's important for me to leave a trail of breadcrumbs. What's going on? How is this happening? When I came into the field, Octavia Butler and Chip Delaney were the only Black science fiction writers who were working in the field. Chip left the field, leaving me and Octavia. And Octavia, of course, was to me like a big sister. I was sane enough to know that she was operating above my level.
You lived right down the street from
her. Yeah,
her.
I lived right down the street from Octavia. We used to get together for dinner, and she didn't drive, so I would take her to conventions and signings and stuff like that. And we had a lot of conversations about what was going on. And all I can tell you is that your love for her would thrill her. The fact that you have not forgotten her, that her work means something to you. I can absolutely promise you that it would be so meaningful to her spirit to know that what she did mattered, that there's this thing called Afrofuturism, and that she is an important part of it.
A huge part of it, a huge part of it. I met a childhood friend of Octavia's at a local gathering in LA, because Octavia was raised in Pasadena. And she said, her friend basically said that Octavia would be blown away by the response to her work.
She was very shy, and very reclusive in a lot of ways, and most comfortable surrounded by her books or by writers. And then she grew to be able to speak in gatherings. But what we're looking at here is she did these things. She began to write. She began to create stories because she did not see herself in films, in books. And she had that sense of, where am I? That's the exact same feeling that I had. Where am I? The typical writer has the I can do better than that attitude. But in addition, I think the Black writers have that who am I? And when I realized, it was just about a month ago, really, I realized that Tanana Reeve had been teaching a class in Afrofuturism at UCLA. How long have you been doing this?
A couple of years. I've taught it 3 or 4 times now. Yeah.
And that what we could do something very special. We could create a version of this that's designed to go online, where we could have a worldwide audience, that we could create by combining social media and email and webinars and other technologies that we'll be introducing to you as time goes by. We can create a worldwide clearinghouse, so that there are other academics that are doing fantastic things. But one of the advantages that we have is that we're married to each other. We both create, we both teach about the creation. And so we have the pulse in a particular way. We know so many people. Our Rolodex is bursting with people who are creative and intelligent and fantastic and want to share.
For you millennials, a Rolodex was a group of papers and index cards you would flip around. And anyway, never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Stephen, you are getting old.
So in any case, just to sort of give you an overview, it's a 10-week course, although there will be some weeks we'll give you announcements in advance where we won't be able to make it. So we'll have a break in between classes. So we'll have a clear schedule. After this broadcast, you will receive a link to the broadcast so you can watch it again, in addition to a page that has all of the links that we're discussing in class, and some supplemental materials that were not a part of the homework. An interview with George Clinton, a TED Talk by Wanuri Kahiu, the filmmaker who made Pumzi, just little supplemental links so that you can dive deeply into the course. And it's a 10-week course. There are 10 lectures, and there's an interview with a special guest every class. This week, it's Luke Cage, creator, showrunner, Cheo Hodari Coker.
Yes.
Super excited about that. But we have different artists, an activist. We have different guests every week, and you'll also have links to those interviews directly. So if you just want to see the interview, you can click on that link.
That's right. If you want to talk about these things, please do so over on the Facebook group. That's why it's there.
It's called Life Writing.
Yeah, Life Writing. All you have to do is ask, and you'll be late. And hopefully, you guys are already in there.
Yeah, a lot of you may be. So yeah, just to kick things off with a little bit of context.
Yes.
In 1997, Steve and I met when we were both invited to a conference at Clark Atlanta University called the African American Fantastic Imagination, Explorations in Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. And I was a brand new writer. I had just published one novel. Someone told me, oh, you got to check out this Stephen Barnes. He's a TV writer. He's done this and that. And sure enough, his name showed up on this invitation list just a couple weeks after I heard his name. And we met and we fell in love, and then we married. So it was momentous for us just as a personal story, but that was where I met Octavia Butler, who was also there. Samuel R. Delaney, Steve calls him Chip Delaney, was also there. Jewel Gomez was there. And as a new writer, I had been exposed to the Horror Writers Association, which was mostly white, and all the Black bookstores. And there were so many that supported me early in my career, but most of those audiences were Black. I had never been invited to an event that blended both the science fiction, fantasy, and horror lovers with the Black audience. And it was pretty mind-blowing. And Octavia had a similar reaction. How did it strike you?
Well, it's like, I remember maybe 25 years ago. I mean, in a lot of ways that I felt like a stranger in a strange land. In order for me to learn the things that I needed to learn in order to have the career that I wanted, it felt like I was traveling around just nothing but white people. I mean, literally, in my entire career, I had never been in a green room at a convention where there was another Black male writer.
Oh,
it hadn't even happened once.
Right.
And so when I walked into Clark Atlanta University and I saw, I remember walking in there, and I found myself in a room full of Black people who understood and appreciated Rocky and Bullwinkle. And frankly, it blew my mind.
Right.
I mean, I felt like I was home. And then I met you, and I thought you were much a good deal younger than me, a day or two younger than me. And I was feeling, I didn't have any idea how good you were or were not. Because in a community that small, quite often you celebrate people just for their potential rather than their actuality.
Like a participation award.
Then I think that it was a copy of either The Between or My Soul to Keep. They had at the bookstore. It was My Soul to Keep.
The Between. No.
It was The Between?
Yeah.
Okay. So I started reading in The Between. I'd read 2 pages in The Between, and I realized that at creating mimetic fiction and depicting the world as it is, despite the fact that this was your first book, and I was like 15 novels into my career, you already did that better than I did.
Well, I don't know about all that.
No. Not saying you're a better writer, although Harlan Ellison thinks you are. I'm saying that I could see something in your work that made me say, oh my God, this woman has real talent. And all I wanted at that point was to protect you. I wanted to be able to take, just as other writers had helped me, I wanted to help you. And that's the way it really goes.
And then we kind of fell and crushed with each other, and that sort of veered off into marriage in a different direction. But it started in a good place. And in some ways, the meeting my soulmate and the man I would marry, and we've been married almost 20 years at this point, was sort of a reflection of the momentous occasion that we were a part of, because it was 1997, so it was a few years after the coining of the term Afrofuturism by Mark Derry, a cultural critic. But this had been going on before the term was coined, obviously. Chip Delaney had been publishing since the 1960s, and so it had been, but
it's stuff from the 19th century that could conceivably be considered Afrofuturism.
W.E.B. Du Bois, back in the 20s. So yes, it existed before it was named, but I was just so lucky to come along at a time when both Afrofuturism was sort of being finally now understood and named, and the Black publishing was having this renaissance on the heels of Terry McMillan, which is how I got in. I did not get in through traditional science fiction or horror paths. It was all Black commercial editors who were interested in my book. It's like, oh, Terry McMillan's selling, let's see if this horror novel will sell. And even though those two concepts might not seem similar, they are. It's commercial fiction. And it was a time when that was really ripe. So it's just, I was very lucky when I came along in the business.
Well, let's get into that question of Afrofuturism and into the way you would introduce the subject in your class. What is it exactly, and why is it important?
Gosh, it's such a hard, I've been teaching it so long, and that question is never easy to answer, but it is the imagining of Black skin, Black faces, Black characters in mythological, futuristic environments, often backward looking and rooted in social problems in the present and the past, but often with a path toward the future. Now, the term futurism makes people think, oh, it must be only science fiction. And there are some people who might consider Afrofuturism. And by the way, it's not just literature, it's music, it's art, it's film, but it's Black-centered, Black speculative arts. So it would be science fiction, fantasy, horror, magical realism, all of those realms of things people say can't happen or haven't happened, or magic isn't real except if it is. So that is, to me, and that's how I teach Afrofuturism. So yes, science fiction and literal futurism is a big part of Afrofuturism. But also I would say a movie like Eve's Bayou by Casey Lemons, which we're going to watch for this class. Magical realism, that is also, to me, Afrofuturism. So yeah, basically it's flourishing right now as a worldwide movement and area of study. It's also called the Black speculative arts movement.
So Afro speculation might be called.
Yeah, Afro speculation.
It's just like science fiction is a subset of fantasy. Fantasy, all fiction is fantasy in some ways, but when we talk about fantasy classically, we're usually talking about dreams and mythology and things that involve magic and things that are not in our world. Whereas science fiction is a subset of that, is fantasy that has some relationship usually to physics, some relationship to the phenomenological world as we understand it. It's grounded in a specific way, playing a specific game. I would say that Black people you start with religion, that your situation in the Americas is horrid. It's horrible. You have no control over your lives. You have no control over your bodies, and you're told who it is that you are. You're told you are an animal. Okay?
So you end up with something like, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade. Now that is an image of escape that is also coded language in slave spirituals, which I would count as the first Afrofuturism, as slave spirituals, like you were saying, rooted in religion.
Yes, well, it's also the idea of, the Bible says that without a vision, the people perish. So you have a vision of what your life can be outside the chains, milk and honey on the other side, or escape. If you're not going to be rewarded in this life, the next life, or we can escape if we pull together.
Yeah, so it works either way. It's an image of escape, sort of a utopian image of escape, but it's also a literal roadmap. Like if you want to avoid the dogs, you need to wade in the water. Okay.
So the first fantasies, you had African mythology stripped away from the slaves to a large degree, but you can't do it completely because you have oral traditions. And so they become combined with Christianity, and they become combined with things that you can say right underneath the master's face. But you start moving from there to fantasy. But then eventually, the first generation is slaves. The next generation after that is agricultural workers and house servants. And after that, you get, teachers and shopkeepers. And after that, you get doctors and lawyers. And after that, you get scientists. And after that, when your community is relatively solid, then you start getting artists. I mean, you've had artists all along, but you start encouraging your children to become artists because you can afford. You've got 4 children, and one of them is a teacher, and one of them is a doctor, and one of them is a lawyer. The fourth one can be an artist. So when you have people who have both the arts and the sciences in their community, they can start talking to each other, and now you've got the possibility of science fiction.
And speaking of which, I think this is a great analogy. Think back to what it was like in the 1960s. My parents, my late mother, Patricia Stevens Dew, and my father, who's still living, John Dew, a civil rights lawyer, both risked their lives, I would say, in the cause for voter registration and anti-segregation in the 1960s. So just imagine you have young people literally on the streets getting beaten, pulled off buses, pulled out of lunch counters, police hoses on them, all for this dream of a better promised tomorrow that we've never had evidence of. There was never a time when we had the equality and it was taken away. So it's like this dream that we can have it. And at the same time, you turn on your television set and there's Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Uhura. on Star Trek, on the deck of the ship, controlling things, treated as an equal. So there's the fiction and it woven within the science, but literally at the same time, we have the women from Hidden Figures, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson in real life actually carrying out the task to help us get up in space. So it wasn't fiction, really, you know, and all of that is interwoven. So Nichelle Nichols helps us dream. The women who are doing the work are actually doing the work, and it all feeds upon itself. You have to dream. Those women had to dream to get where they were. And we've all had to dream to get to where we are and hopefully to the next place, which is even better.
If all of your life you've been abused and people tell you that you're nothing, that you can't accomplish anything, in order for you to become a doctor, a lawyer, to believe that there's a reason to keep going when all seems lost, you have to have a dream. You have to believe in yourself. You have to find someone to help you believe in yourself, or you have to create dreams that carry you through those times, through the dark night of the soul, as saying the hero's journey. So for Black people who've been told for 250 years, the first slaves arrived here in 1619, we achieved emancipation in about 1865. So for 250 years, we were told we were a particular thing. Then we were fighting for equality. But the problem is that in order to really be equal within a society, if what you're aiming at is equality, you will be inferior, because you dare not draw ahead of the person next to you. You can be equal, but you can't be better than. You have to have permission to be better than. You have to have permission to win. You have to have permission to beat them. You have to have permission to shine, to grow. That's where the dreams in a culture come from. Right. So we had to create our own dreams of a world in which we were not just equal to, but every other group thinks they're superior. Every other group has mythologies that say that, God created them first and loves them best. We had to have permission to see ourselves in the stars, to see ourselves with wings, to see ourselves shining. Just in order to be equal, you have to be able to imagine yourself being the best.
Right. So, long before the term was coined, as we've said, Black writers and artists have envisioned themselves in a future or a revised past, as in Steve's brilliant novel, Lion's Blood, which we'll also read a portion of maybe, where they can escape, examine, and postulate alternative social, economic, political, and personal tableaus, both through imagination and technology, which is an important part of it. So Afrofuturist artists give us images of futurism as a lens through which to view and change the present, but never forgetting the past.
So, dreams to banish nightmares. The nightmare is the world that you're in right now. It's also the fear that maybe you're as inferior as people say you are. When you hear that often enough, it becomes the voice in your head. You have to cancel those voices. You have to find some way to believe. Believe that there is something beyond today. Believe that there is something beyond your current situation. The sciences give you the way out of that. It's just faith until then. Until then, the question, well, why did Europe conquer Africa instead of the other way around, is a matter of faith. But once you have the sciences in your corner, once you start looking at genetics, once you start looking at the way animals are raised and domesticated, and the spread of domesticated species of plants, and the fact that things travel north-south differently than they do east-west. You start looking at the history of these things. You start looking at where all human beings came from. The science sets you free. It can be used against you at one point with things like eugenics. But at another point, you start being able to realize that we're all part of the same organism, the same human family. And you begin to go to the basic questions of science fiction, what if only, and if this goes on, which relate to the basic questions of philosophy and art, which is, who am I? What is true? So all of this fantastic literature of the imagination is always asking, what is the universe? What is true? And who am I? What are human beings? What are the human beings that witness this world? And science fiction has had a very specific way of approaching these things, a very specific set of tools. And it has given me so much pleasure to watch this evolving, watch our community evolving from religion to fantasy to science fiction, to engage our imaginations with the world as it is and begin to dream harder and harder dreams. That so much has happened just in the 50 years that I've been observing it, that I've been kind of awake to watching this happen. We are growing so rapidly. And what we want with this community is to share what we know, to share what the people we know, and then to help nurture you to create your own dreams, at the very least, to understand the importance of these dreams.
So if you're artists, then it helps you create your art with more consciousness, and you're doing it with intentionality, rather than say accidentally getting it right. Also, if you're not an artist, if you're a consumer of art, it makes you a more critical observer, so that when people get it wrong, as Neil Blomkamp did in his
District 9.
Okay, it could have been amazing. There were parts of it that technologically that were amazing, but the artist tripped up in his own blind painting what could have been an amazingly groundbreaking science fiction film set in South Africa.
I think for a South African, he was really progressive, but he was pulling against pre-assumptions that exist within his culture that made it difficult for him to see that he was presenting Black people as either without agency or animalistic. It is so easy for that to happen when other people are controlling the image systems. And it's not that they're bad people. If Black people were controlling the image systems, we would be misrepresenting white people. It's just everybody tries to create most important.
So if you're trying to write more inclusive fiction or be more inclusive in whatever art form, this course can also be helpful in contextualizing, seeing what's come before, and avoiding some of the more obvious pitfalls. We're living at a time when Afrofuturism is really coming to the forefront of popular culture. Like if you've seen Beyonce's Lemonade, for example, that's the images of magical realism and Afrofuturism, an homage to the work of Julie Dash in Daughters of the Dust. So Beyonce herself is honoring the past while standing on her sister's shoulders to create the sounds and images of the future, screaming of empowerment, self-care, self-love. And that love for self seen in the work of Afrofuturistic, especially women artists, extends beyond our collective personal experience and bodies to the realm of social justice. Well, not just the women, a lot of us, to the realm of social justice. So it's no coincidence that Bree Newsome, who's going to be one of our upcoming guests, Afrofuturistic filmmaker. She had a horror film called Wake, which you'll see as a part of the class.
See, I wanted her there because I think she's a real life superhero.
Well, yeah, she climbed up when we were hurting after the Charleston massacre, and there was all this back and forth about the Confederate flag and whether it should be flying, and she climbed her behind up there and took it down, and she'll talk about it. So that to me is a live superhero. And then when you get to the realm of social science fiction, look no farther than Octavia Butler, let's say Parable the Sower, rather. So it's no coincidence that work seems so prescient during our current political times, even just a few years after its publication. It feels like we're living in now, almost, just to read it a couple years later. And it's not a coincidence that W.E.B. Du Bois, activist and scholar, co-founder of the NAACP, was also a science fiction writer. And it's certainly not a coincidence that Black artists are creating images of themselves in the future when the mainstream culture has worked so hard to exclude and erase our images, even in the past, present, and the future. So I would argue that this is a movement, and it helps provide a roadmap toward real life world building.
Whether you want to understand or you want to create, my goal is to create 1 million awake, aware adult human beings. And my methodology is to facilitate 1,000 awake, aware adult storytellers and artists. If you can just support, that's great. And that means that we want to educate you so you can appreciate what it is that's being created and the significance thereof. But if you want to create art, we want to give you very specific tools. When we put these storytellers, these people who are accomplished, sometimes they are creators themselves and sometimes they are observers of creation. We want you to listen to them on every level. We want you to watch them repeatedly, take notes. Each one of these people has poked their head up and made their voice heard. How did they do it? If you want to know how to succeed, what you're going to have to do is listen to 100 different people who've succeeded, realize that each of them succeeds in a slightly different way, find the things that are in common until there's something inside you that says, I could do that. I could do that. I could do it that way. Okay. And when you hear that, you then can begin your own process of creating your own world, your own creative world.
So this course will encompass the literature, music, film, and art of Afrofuturism. And it is an overview. It's a deep well. And you really could just fall into the works of Octavia Butler. We could teach a whole course just on her works, and you all know that's true if you've read her. Or the music of George Clinton and Sun Ra alone, or Lemonade alone, or the music of Afrofuturism alone. So you'll see there's just so much. Hopefully we'll introduce you to some artists that you weren't familiar with. I'm guessing many of you had never heard of Wanuri Kahiu, who wrote and directed Pumzi, for example, and hopefully you've had a chance to watch Pumzi. That creates the same effect as, say, watching Hidden Figures, you know, and widening our own perspectives of what is possible, what has been, you know. Oh, wait, in fact, Pumzi and Bree Newsom's film Wake were two of the films that helped me realize, hey, we could make a movie. Yeah. And we made our own film, Danger Word. So it's like lighting it's a spark lighting a flame, basically. And as Wanuri Kahiu said in her TED Talk Nairobi in 2012, you'll get that link in your class materials, quote, "When we talk about our own history, it's always been written by other people. Because we don't have a link to our own history, because we don't have a grasp of our history, we're using Afrofuturism to stake a place in the future so that we can strongly identify ourselves in the future."
So.
And we're also going to look at some popular entertainment. Sorry, you want to go?
No.
Anytime, honey, because I got a whole. We'll look at some popular.
No, I guess the thing that I wanted to say is that because some of you are writers, I always teach the hero's journey and the chakras to talk about structure and but I'm probably going to do that mostly off stage this time. It'll be in the notes. And this, for instance, when you get the notes for this week's class, there's an analysis of Pumzi using the hero's journey. By looking at patterns, we're going to be giving you so much information, so many different things. It'll be like drinking from a fire hose. So what you're going to be looking for is the patterns that repeat underneath all the complexity. Don't look at just the leaves on the tree. Look at the root. It's the root that will give you the chance to say, aha, that's me too. This is the way I'm going to do it. When I was a little boy and I realized I wanted to do this thing, I had to study all these different people and find the thing that was in common. What's the difference that made the difference? So if you will do that, if you will let us to both show you the infinite complexity, but also keep going back to the roots, the things that all these people are doing in common, the thing that you can do to nurture yourself. And if you're an ally, the things you can do to support. I mean, you're doing that just by being here. True. And by interacting over on the Life Writing Group and just being aware, being woke, you know, as I say, to be aware that we're all human and some of us are hurting and we're dealing with that pain the best we can. And art is a way to deal with pain without savagery. So art is sacred to me.
And the African diaspora produces this kind of work because almost no matter where we landed, whether you're still in the continent or if you landed in the Caribbean, you landed in the United States, a lot of us share this history of either slavery, certainly colonization, or erasure. You know, even a Kenyan filmmaker is talking about how her history is written by other people. That's pretty deep when you really think about it. So these are common social memes that appear in our work, whether we're in Kenya or Pasadena, like Octavia. And who better than Octavia with height, where she got fairly young, I think junior high, she said. That's really tall for a junior high student. Her Black skin and childhood poverty gave her the perfect vantage point from which to create her survivors, her aliens, her vampires, and telepaths. The perfect lens to study the impact of power and hierarchy, which she came to again and again in her work, survival and slavery, the urgency to ask. And she was in this state of urgency. You'll also get a copy of an interview that we did with Octavia, where she talked very specifically what she was trying to do in her work, why history unfolded as it did, and how it might unfold, as Steve said, if this goes on, which is one of science fiction's primary questions. Where will we land, not as Blacks, but as a human race, if this goes on? And that is what Octavia is all about. I had the pleasure of knowing her, not as well as Steve, but sharing conversations with her. And I truly believe she thought our very survival depended on changing our practices and behaviors, and that much of her writing centers around that conversation. Is it reasonable that we have reached a point where we have to, as she would say, change or die?
Octavia felt that there was one thing about humanity, and that was our tendency to be, well, it was two things. One thing expressed in two ways. One was our tendency to be hierarchical, to say that this is better than that. The other is our tendency to place ourselves higher on that hierarchy. And so then you get racism and sexism and cultural elitism and imperialism and all sorts of other things that come out of that. I mean, it's unfortunate, perhaps, that you can't eliminate that completely, because human consciousness works largely in one of two ways. It works to find similarities between things or differences between things. And you need both of those things. But out of that can come some real raving horror. Out of that comes tribalism. Out of that comes so many of the problems that have plagued humanity, but you can't get rid of it completely either. So I'd say you move back and forth between sort of a liberal, more progressive, we are all one, and a more conservative, no, there are many differences. And somewhere in the middle is a truth that we can actually live with, that there is real dysfunction to be avoided at the extremes of either end. I think that right now our country has taken a swing, an unfortunate swing, towards this sort of isolationistic, dichotomous, this as opposed to that. And what we need, the arts can help connect us and bring us back to the center.
Yeah, we need a whole lecture. I could do a whole lecture just on that, so I'm going to swallow it back. I have a lot of feelings. But to get back to Octavia, one of the gifts she gives us in Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents is, despite this dystopian framework, there's a utopia hidden within it, in the religion she created called Earthseed. And those tenets of Earthseed, and I mean literally remembering the only lasting truth is change, got me past November 8th, if you know what I mean. And I think you do. It's like, why did I forget? How? Because suddenly it made sense. Oh, the only lasting truth is change. So it's all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. So great hope rises from the specter of great despair. And Butler helps us through visualization and imagination cross that line from fiction to reality, hopefully in a proactive way. Storytelling really is a key part of human survival. She knew that. Stories keep us alive, body and spirit. So we organize our religions, our governments around the power of narrative. This, control the narrative around the story. It's not just marketing spend. So.
No. Look, individual facts have to be organized into a matrix in order to be recognized by the human consciousness as storytelling. There are certain patterns that you have to go through that mirror the patterns of actual human life. It's non-temporal. It's organizing information by meaning rather than by temporal sequence. And when you do that, when you realize that, then the person who can control the story, as Tananari said, is the person who controls your consciousness and controls the meaning in a culture. So the exact same events can happen. And in a court case, the district attorney and the defense lawyer will both try to sell their story of what happened, given those events. The jury will try to stay neutral and listen to these two different stories about it. The same thing happens in business. The same thing happens in politics. The same thing happens if you are raising children. You try to tell them a story about what their lives are going to be. The same thing that happens if you're that a preacher does in religion. You tell a story about life and death and hopes and dreams, and what is sexuality, and what is honesty, and what are all these things, and why is it that we should prefer long-term benefits over short-term pleasures. The person who controls the story, if you can control the story in your own mind, you can control what you do or do not do, what you're capable of doing. In your marriage, the person who controls the story, hopefully the husband and wife are sharing the same story about what it means and where they're going and what they're going to try to do. So when you write these stories, and you look at stories and you read stories and you see stories on the screen and you start getting more educated about what this is, you can start asking yourself, what are they saying human beings are? What is this movie, this story saying human beings are? What is it saying that the world is? I'd say watch a movie for the first time just for the sheer pleasure of it, or read a book for the first time for the sheer pleasure of it. Then try watching it or reading it again and ask yourself, what is the philosophical subtext? What are these people saying about the nature of life and the nature of humanity? A completely different world of meaning opens to you.
That is a great transition to the discussion of the course materials. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at Pumzi, listen to the music of George Clinton, and to watch a little bit of Luke Cage. Now, if that's not the coolest homework, come on now. We didn't even really give you reading for week 1, although there is a reading for week 2. But first, I want to talk about George Clinton and Parliament and that video of the mothership, which I hope you got a chance to see. It's now on display at the Smithsonian. That song in the video was Mothership Connection Star Child, the second coming. The mothership represents not just spectacle, which it certainly is, but I think also the prospect of escape. The biblical reference to the second coming amplifies this theme of salvation through music. While you're grooving, pay attention. I'm not a big lyrics person. I had to look up the lyrics. So when you really listen to the lyrics, it even makes more sense. It's in this mental escape. It's like, well, all right, Star Child, citizens of the universe, recording angels, we have returned to claim the pyramids, partying on the mothership. I am the mothership connection. And the singer works the audience into a frenzy. It'll take energy to get the mothership in here tonight, he tells the audience, and everybody goes wild trying to build up the energy. And if you listen to that refrain, let me ride, becomes a kind of meditation, even a prayer, because the lyrics, get this, are swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Going back again to those slave spirituals, both utopian vision and literal roadmap. So again, the history is embedded in the lyrics. At the same time, futurism, a literal spacecraft, or at least a replica spacecraft landing on the stage, is visualized for the audience. Lyrics made real. And like I said, George Clinton is a very, very deep well. But all of this is the spirit of all Afrofuturistic art, although particularly so in the music of Afrofuturism, which pushes boundaries of costumes, as you'll see with Sun Ra videos we'll discuss next week, and often technology, pushing technology, creating technology, repurposing technology in the music, or a fusion of musical styles, which we'll see later with Miles Davis. George Clinton, of course, was an innovator of funk alongside James Brown and Sly Stone. Broad strokes, he started at Motown as a staff songwriter in the 1960s, started recording in the late 60s, but he's best known with the bands Parliament and Funkadelic, which you connoisseurs will know became P-Funk. And as Minister Faust, master Afrofuturist, wrote about Clinton in 2013. I love this passage. George Clinton, as everyone knows, is the singer and composer, the founding funkitect, the Speaker of Parliament, the jester, the judge of doomed America, the Afrofuturist Neo to Sun Ra's Morpheus, the prophet of humanity coming together, the Star Child, and the revealer of the great vehicle of solar salvation, S-O-U-L, salvation, the mothership. Just as accurately, you can say he's the rainbow dreadlocker who propelled the evolution of hundreds of hip-hop acts while partying eternally in the slap-based depths of sex, drugs, and penisoid spaceship album cover. So he contains multitudes, In fact, I listened to the interview for George Clinton, we'll send you the link to, where he said people brought out more from his music than he felt he was putting in, and I think artists often feel that way, but it's digging into the unconscious level of creation, and people can point out things about what he was creating that he didn't even consciously maybe even realize he was doing at the time.
Okay, I just wanted to address one question we got here before we go into start going into our specific guest today, and that is, we had a question from Elizabeth. What do you do when you're past the point of thinking you're inferior or equal to your oppressors, but still have no power? First of all, wake up to the idea that you have no power. You do not. That is an illusion. You do have power. Anyone who is willing to tell the truth and die in the process of doing what they can do, anyone who has given up the illusion that you're going to live forever, and that there's some way that you can live a life that is small enough that death will tiptoe past the cave that you're hiding in and not notice you, has power. The system is afraid of people who are not afraid. You can have art. You can tell the truth. You can support the people to your right and to your left. You can create art or you can support art. You can become part of things like this, but wake up to the idea that you have no power. Wake up to the fact that you are the most powerful thing in the universe, a human being, an adult, awake, aware human being who will not be denied. That has power.
Free your mind and your ass will follow. Back to George Clinton, although I think it's the other way around. Free your ass or your mind will follow. But anyway, very well put, and thank you for that, honey. And I think that brings us actually very nicely to the discussion of Poomsie, and then we'll go to Luke Cage.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
So yes, this this is a Poomsie. If you had a chance to watch it, I'll try not to spoil it completely if you didn't. But like I told my students, y'all were supposed to do the homework. Poomsie takes place in a society that lives underground because they believe that the Earth is dead. There's a water war and nuclear winter outside. So basically, they live underground and they create their own energy on exercise machines, which I think Black Mirror ripped off, but whatever. In any case, this society has dream suppressants, which is one of my favorite aspects of this piece, which every time I watch, I see something else. I recommend watching it more than once. I guarantee you'll see details you missed the first time. So the name of this community is in Kikuyu, and it means mother seed. And that is actually the name of the community. Asha, I think is her name, right? Herself is also literally a kind of mother seed in her journey through the story. So it's about this society out of fear. Obviously, they've had a horrible war. They're near extinction. So of course, you're going to be very strict with your rules. The dream suppressants, though, we were having a conversation in the comment stream about how unfortunate it is that so many schools are getting rid of arts programs. And I definitely see a correlation between yanking arts programs and trying to squash people's dreams. Those two things literally squash your dreams.
It's not an accident.
No, it's not an accident. So this society keeps order by having a very regimented sort of existence, and even dreaming is outside of bounds. So yes. I don't know, you feel free to comment if there were other themes that popped up for you. One of the things the director talks about in her TED Talk, which you can see, is this theme of sacrifice, which is very obvious. You'll see why that's important.
Yes. And also make sure that when you read your homework, you'll see my hero's journey analysis of Poomsie, and start a conversation over on the Facebook page so we can have more relaxed time to talk about these things.
Yeah. And I could put up a Poomsie discussion with a picture and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to talk about it. It really is worth picking apart. And if you can watch the interview with the director, that was also very enlightening. So there's a lot of imagery of the ancient meeting the modern. You have a technological society on the one hand, but when she's out in the desert in her wrap and not even wearing shoes, again, that's very ancient imagery. So she's combining ancient and modern there. I just find it beautiful. I CLA class with Poomsie because rather than explaining what Afrofuturism is, like, look here, watch this. This is Afrofuturism. This is what it looks like. And I always cry every time I see it. I think it's beautifully done.
I think it was extraordinarily done. I mean, that is what short film is supposed to be. Short stories can do the same thing. You can write short stories or you can support them. Once again, what changes the world is the idea that it's possible to move forward. Human beings countless times have felt like all is lost and there's nothing to be done. And they found that they had more power than they thought they did. I would rather at the end of my moment of my life, and I saw large, I could live with that. But if at the last moment of my life, I had clarity and saw that I could have changed the world for the better if I just believed in myself, that would feel like hell. I will choose to believe. I will choose to believe that I can fight, that I can win, that I can protect the helpless, that I can speak my truth. Mm-hmm. I choose to believe that. First came the word. I will say that to myself and I will say that to others, understanding that I'm making it up as I go along. I know that perfectly well, but I'll make it up that way. And I will protect my heart and I will protect this woman that I love and I will protect my children and my neighbors and my community and my tribe. And that means you guys. And you can either stand beside me and fight, or you can stand behind me and be protected. Either one is fine by me. It's both fine. I'm strong enough to do that. And we are strong enough to protect each other.
Misty had a comment about Poomsie, brought up similar questions about the kindness, cruelty of hope. Is it kinder to let people dream if they can't change the world as the council believes? But that's why dreams are so important, because guess what? The council is wrong.
That's right. You don't know what you can and cannot change.
Yeah.
You know, make it up. You know, you make your decision. Would you rather dream and be proven wrong, or stay asleep and find out you could have changed things? Which would you rather do? Because you'll never know for sure. I say that dreams are the most precious thing in the world, and when you kill dreams, you've destroyed the people.
All right. Someone says they're frozen. I don't know if the feed is frozen for anyone. If I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, but let's move on to Luke Cage, because we want to share our guest.
Yes, absolutely, we do.
Well, no, not to play it. Let's talk
No.
about it. Oh.
Okay. So what I wanted to do, there was something I wanted to share.
Got it.
Application window. And we're right there. Boom. Okay, in 1971, the Shaft television, or the Shaft movie came out, and it blew people's minds because we'd never seen an image quite like that. In 1972, Marvel Comic Books put out Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, later became Power Man. It was created by, it was all, you know, white creators, but they saw a need. They saw something to be done there, and they created it. And for all, you know, cheesing to the costume and the headband and the chain around. I loved this comic book, and it lasted. It didn't last a long time, but the character lasted and would go in and out of different groups, and then finally kind of faded away to some degree. Yeah, Sweet Christmas. It kind of faded away, but then with the resurgence of Marvel and dominating, and then Daredevil on Netflix being hugely successful, followed by, you know, Jennifer Jones. And I heard that they were going to do Luke Cage. And the real question was, could this possibly be any good? Could it possibly be what I remembered, or better? Because it needed to be better than what I remembered. And when I found out that Cheo Hodari Coker was going to be doing it, I thought to myself, this has got a chance. And when I saw the series itself, I realized that something extraordinary was going on. That because of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all these, it's still like there are 1,000 have just a big will pay for and do material that appeals to a smaller but still significant portion of the audience. This is the best time in history to be a creator of fantasy. And we were blessed to get Cheo Hodari Coker.
Strong roles for women that jumped out for me in this series. I don't usually find that many women I relate to, and I had my pick. You know, who do I want to be? They're all strong in different ways. I love the integration of the world of superheroes and the mundane. Like when they're selling the guy selling the DVDs out on the sidewalk, he's talking about the just like they really the DVDs on the sidewalk, the big green menace.
We managed to get you give us an interview.
Yes, we
did. And we just want to play this for you, and then later on once again on Facebook, discuss. So let me get this. I'll have this in just a second.
Please stand by.
Please stand by. Easier. Should be.
No, I'm delayed.
Yeah.
Let me ask if they can hear it.
Yeah, it should be. Volume's right there.
Why can't we hear? Hold on, if you're not getting any sound.
Okay, turn it. Is your sound turned on?
There's not getting audio.
Is your sound turned on?
Yeah. We're working on the audio, everyone. Sorry about that. Hold on, if you're not getting it. Not sure why there's no audio.
Why wouldn't there be audio?
People that were trying to get on at the same time. That's what caused the breakdown.
We're going to back it up.
And so I've always
got our audio. Sorry about that.
That was like a video.
So it's been better than locking the door before you walk in. There you are in your hoodie, 245 pounds of angry black man heading into a bank. They close the door. We know what that's about.
See, yeah, but the logo might have helped though. Little Luke Cage.
I love the hoodie. I love it. I love it. So congratulations, by the way. We haven't talked to you in a minute. You came to Skype with our screenwriting class a while back, but since then, you've been the showrunner for Luke Cage. It's a successful first season.
More than successful. You broke.
It's funny, there have been various explanations as to why that happened, but I'm very proud of it.
More than proud, man. You made history.
What it means is that basically, from what I heard, there was a very small glitch that normally would have gotten corrected, but because of the volume of people that were trying to get on at the same time, that's what caused the breakdown. And so I thought that was like, of anything that we did, I thought that was the coolest thing. And now it's kind of become the standard, because since Netflix doesn't release any numbers, the only quantifiable standard you have of whether or not you blew up is shutting the service down. So every single show coming after us, that's really what they're trying to do. Our big challenge, honestly, is to see if we can do it again, and although I can't talk about our second season, I really am.
No, we don't want to talk about what's coming, because I want to be totally surprised. What I want to talk about is your journey up until now, and how you see yourself as an artist who obviously has a huge amount of social consciousness. There was every frame of that show showed love, man. You loved those characters. You loved that world. And I mean, just as an artist, not even just as someone trying to teach other people how to do that, I'd like to know about your process. How did you see your job? What can you tell us about how you did it?
Brought that heart to the show.
Well, it's a lot of things. I mean, the thing is that I remember the importance of using art to communicate history and truth. Like, one of my first examples was hip hop. Like, even though I grew up in a house where books were valued and treasured, and a lot of academics, I remember reading about Public Enemy. And I remember some of the first articles, like one of the first articles that appeared, John Leland might have written it, Spin Magazine. But I remember that there was an actual reading list. And amongst the books were like the autobiography of Malcolm X, of W.E.B. Du Bois, Souls of Black Folk. And I remember not listening to the records, but the records forced me into the library. And so that was the thing, was I thought to myself, with the opportunity of doing this show, how could we have this show and still be a Marvel show to our bones, and still have bulletproof action and all that stuff, but then at the same time have this intellectual bent, that because of the fact that we're only going to drop 13 episodes, it's going to take, luckily we did come back. It takes a while breadcrumbs for people to kind of look at things and think of. I mean, because everything's on the internet, so it's like, if I have two characters in a barbershop talking about Donald Goines versus Walter Mosley, they can just very easily pause what they're watching, go right to Amazon, and boom, within a day, have the books, or really instantaneously if they read them on their Kindle.
Yes.
And so it was just really the opportunity to just drop all these different crumbs of culture all over the place, and also taking advantage of the fact that because it's Harlem is basically Washington, D.C. and Las Vegas in one locale. You have all of the politics, but then you have all of the danger of entertainment all in one place. And so that's kind of what Harlem's Paradise represented. And it was basically layering all of these worlds and having Luke Cage navigate through them, because it was very important to me that this would be a Black character was imbued with Black culture rather than it being a white character that's got dipped in chocolate.
I will that when I saw that show, one of the first things I said to Tananarive about 3/4 of the way through the first episode, this is the blackest show I have ever seen on television. And for it to be a comic book show, that you did that, you used comic books as a soporific to slip in something that was culturally the Black experience and the Black American experience, not an African experience, not an American experience, but something unique that was created. The title of our show, our class is probably Afrofuturism, Dreams to Billionaires. And our dream as a culture to create fantasies, to, it starts with the religion, milk and honey on the other side, but it goes from there to asking what we might be. And by creating a bulletproof Black man and taking that original concept of a superpowered shaft. Because I remember, I had the first episode of Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, the first comic book issue. I remember what they were trying to do there. And I think that you created something that was what the bullpen would have done had they had the kind of perspective and knowledge that you have. You were absolutely true to the spirit of what they, God bless them, were trying to do at that time. And have you sat down with Stan Lee?
No, I haven't. Years and years ago for Vibe magazine, I talked to him on the phone once. It was a great experience. I mean, even Stan Lee on the phone is like, he has such an enthusiasm for life.
Yes.
I to this day remember that it was funny because I was living at home at the time, and my mom, I got back. My mom said, Stanley called. I said, Stanley? Oh, Stanley? Stan Lee? I was like, Mom, come on. Mother is like the worst secretary in the world. So,
you got a message.
Like throughout my history as a journalist, like so many different famous people would call and she would just completely mess up the message. So, Stanley, she said, Flavor Flav, Mom? Like any number of people that I would, that I'd be doing these phone interviews with, if I happened to be in Connecticut at the time, just had to call the house, that's what would happen. But I remember that. The thing was about him was, no, I never had a chance to actually meet Stan. But the thing was that he gave the opportunity in the comics to open up a world.
Yes.
And that's really, to me, what is really so essential about Marvel, is the fact that when you had two Jewish American writers who, were just scared to death for their families back in Europe, and this is during the height of fascism and Adolf Hitler, and they used their art and their frustrations to create Captain America.
Yes.
Or how the metaphor of mutants has not only basically given voice to analogy to talk about the politics of Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X, or Booker T versus Du Bois. I mean, like, the metaphors are just there, or even now, you find more people saying that they make an reference to coming out as a mutant was similar to their experience coming out as gay or transgender.
Yeah.
And the art has always given, a doorway to being able to talk about any number of topics. In that spirit, what was the best thing about working with Marvel is that they didn't stop me. They might not have understood every single reference in the show. I mean, it's great. Episode, 11, and when Diamondback get ready to push the woman off the balcony, he said, "Bye, Felicia." I remember the notes from Marvel, and Netflix were like, "Who's Felicia?"
Right.
So you'll have these moments that you have to explain, but what's great is that they gave us the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
Okay, we're not going to understand every single reference, but there's something about this that feels cool and feels real, and we're going to give you the opportunity to do it, and not what has happened really in every show before. Just if you look at the history of television, where you always have to have a translator character, or you always have to have somebody that's explaining things, so it takes whatever coolness is out of it. I mean, because my favorite moments as a viewer are being dropped into a world that I know nothing about, and basically having to, understand what I'm looking at. That's really, to me, is what the gift of Scorsese is. Because if you look at a movie like Mean Streets or Goodfellas, I mean, he's throwing you into the depths of what the Lower East Side, Italian American, New York mob experience is. Or if you look at a movie like Trainspotting, which is another one of my favorites, Danny Boyle. You know, I know nothing about heroin. I know nothing about Scotland. But, you know, you watch that movie and it doesn't matter because there's so many things happening that you just go with it. And so that was really the philosophy that we had for Luke Cage, is that, like, rather than explain all these different elements of Harlem and of Black culture, just throw them into it. And
swim in it. Let them swim in it.
97% of people loved it. You know, there were the two. It was fascinating, like watching the internet reaction, because there were the 2% that were like, "Wait a minute, there hasn't been a white person in 20 minutes." And like, and welcome to our world. But the hilarious thing about that was, like, it was funny because when we were going on the various edits of the pilot, because there were sequences that we filmed that didn't make it in, and all different cuts and everything else. We didn't even think about that, and I'm saying, you know, because the grand majority, you know, all of the executives at Marvel are white. So if anybody was going to bring it up, they would have brought it up, but nobody brought it up because it felt cool, and so nobody was even thinking like that. Which is, if you think about it, it's remarkable, because they love the show so much. Nobody said, "Hey, wait a minute, should we have something?" No, we just did it, and it wasn't until the internet reaction that was the biggest shock to us. Like, wow, people are the fact that people still think like that. But what was interesting was that it became a teaching moment, because there were reactions on Twitter. There was this one woman on Twitter who said, I don't know her name, but it was a really incredible statement. Or actually it was Facebook, wherever she actually went out. She said, "Look, I love Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. And so I watched Luke Cage with anticipation. And then I realized, watching the first 20 minutes of the show, that I was uncomfortable. And her realization was that she wanted Luke Cage to be Black on her terms.
Oh.
She was on a completely Black environment, and she was feeling alienated from not understanding all these different references and everything else like that. It forced her to check herself and just think for a second what it's like to be a Black person watching France.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I grew up watching, Bonanza, Gunsmoke. Never saw a Black person and loved those shows. I identified fully with those white characters.
And one of my biggest influences is Woody Allen. I love Woody Allen.
Yes.
Anything Woody Allen puts out, like, I probably have 10 people that watch the Amazon.
Crimes and Misdemeanors, Bananas, everything in between.
He, despite all of his various proclivities, he's a genius.
Yes.
And so the thing is, that's interesting, is that you have people that have the argument, okay, so why, basically, why wouldn't he have any brothers in his movies? The reason that it never bothered me is because he's offering a perspective from his perspective, and the perspective of somebody from the Upper West Side of Manhattan is going to be invariably white. And so if portraying that world accurately forces them to realize that, wait a minute, maybe I am being myopic in my vision. Not that Woody's ever dealt with it. Right. The fact that people can watch these movies and talk about it, or understand, or think about things differently. Don't try to then force diversity on a Spike Lee movie. So, for example, Spike wants to portray something and Do the Right Thing, or something else, or he wants to portray Harlem in Jungle Fever. Like, don't try to force other sensibilities on him, because there are so many other artists that have created their own worlds. And so, give us the same opportunity as African American artists to do that. Because when you start trying to basically, it's like precedent, basically force diversity in one place, it can blow back and try to force another kind of diversity that might not be really needed artistically in another way. And so I think what it is it's not segregating the audiences. It's allowing artists to basically communicate their vision, but then at the same time, stepping back from that and saying, let's look at the real world and let's think about these things. And that's really has always been, the gift of art, because, and that's the only thing. It's like, I would say on one hand, I'm anti-PC, but unfortunately what happens with PC is people try to use PC as this Trojan horse with which they can stamp out all this other stuff. And the thing is that, like, we as Black artists have very rarely have the chance to really express ourselves. Only recently are we able to do that. Yeah. I mean, that to me is what's so revolutionary about, you know, Queen Sugar and Atlanta. Because half the time I'm watching Luke Cage, I'm like, I don't know how they got away with that. Like, wow. But that's the thing, is what's interesting is that it's the first really this generation of shows. Queen Sugar, Insecure, Luke Cage, Atlanta, you know, Black is She, you know, they're created by Black people telling Black stories from Black perspective, and this allowing everybody else to catch up.
Right.
As opposed to constantly trying to translate what things are, or you know, or anything else. And to think about that, it's mind blowing that it's taken to 2016, 2017 to do that. But what's been really fascinating is just how white audiences have just embraced it and on it. And so let's just keep going for it.
Absolutely.
Harkening back to the spirit of, as you were discussing, the roots of Captain America, the power of comics to sustain and inspire. When you look at Luke Cage, especially in our current political situation, because now we can't separate these two things. We're in a situation where artistically, many of us are thriving, maybe like never before, time will tell, but at the same time, very scary times, you know? So I'm wondering what kind of impact you've seen already from Luke Cage, and what would you like to see the impact be as the series continues, or your work in general as the series continues?
Well, it's funny because it's like, probably the craziest thing to me has been, there have been reactions saying that, oh, Luke Cage is a quasi-Black conservative. I don't know if you've seen some of the alternative criticism of the character, you know, because they talk about the scene in episode 2 where he's faced by the kid with the gun to him, where he says, "Don't call me a nigga."
Right.
And you know, and my thing is fascinating to me. I'm like, man, I'm like, you know, to me the brother's more Big Daddy Kane than Herman Cain. You know what I'm saying? So I come from a hip hop generation that is kind of the gift and the curse when it comes to the word nigga, because we basically, by the time I'm 44, so I was born in 72. I'm actually the exact same age as Luke Cage, the comic book character, to a certain extent. Our generation of hip hoppers were basically in our early teens in the early 80s. This would meaning that we had parents that were a part of the Black struggle in terms of civil rights. You know, they might have been SNCC. You know, they remember Malcolm and Martin the same way that my generation, you know, remembers Biggie and Tupac. They were contemporaries that were pushing forward with ideas that people hadn't really been able to articulate until these two forces really came out and said it's the way to go. By the 80s, everybody cut the afros. You know, everything was, you know, like the Dashigis and the Richard Pryor records and the Last Poets, all that stuff just went into, like, started collecting dust. And then when my generation started making records, all that stuff came out. And so they start playing the Richard Pryor records, and they start playing the Last Poets. And, you know, you got the word nigga, and it's used kind of in the A-Rap Brown sense, where it's like very like revolutionary in terms of how it's expressing all these different things. But what happens is that when you start expressing that word in popular culture, it becomes a part of the culture in a way that might not have been anticipated. So I mean, like Chuck D said that rap music is CNN for Black folks. What I would describe hip hop is basically a conversation between two. But what happened is that conversation and the language of the conversation is now broadcast worldwide. So then all of a sudden you've got people speaking the language of that conversation, and it comes back to like, oh, wait a minute, you can't say that word. You can't do this, you can't do that. Because it was never really meant to be. The people that made it didn't think about the worldwide impact. Right. They didn't understand the technology. They didn't understand how these words would be basically transmitted throughout the known universe. Right. So now we're dealing with the politics of it all. So the whole thing, coming back to my point about Luke Cage, is that like you've got a younger generation that like uses that word all the time. It has a meaning to them. My generation is still like, we use this word, but trust me, we understand the politics involved. And so it's like, we're not proud to be called nigga. If we're going to use it, it's going to be a political statement. Because even NWA, if you listen to those records, the gangster records are pretty political. You know, Chuck D, when he has a record like Anti-Nigga Machine, it's very political. And so because Chuck D's, because Luke Cage is of the generation, that's going to be his viewpoint of the word. He's like, you know, he might slip and use the word going to be used around him, but he doesn't want to be called that word. So that doesn't make him conservative. It makes him a conscious brother walking through this world and thinking about things. Yeah. And so people kind of criticize and say, oh, you're being preachy, you gotta do that. Like, no, it's just that you need this perspective out here because, you know, you have to understand something. And you really want to have this first Black hero be about something. And to a certain extent, like, you know, as he's walking through the world, you have the opportunity with this character to have him talk and not just preach about all the things that came before him, but all the things that he's hoping for this new generation. So, you know, everyone has a gun, nobody has a father. Like, you know, there's all these little things that you know, at least that I wrote in the first 2 scripts that just gave us a platform to kind of, you know, talk about the various things that are happening in the community. But at the same time, let's not forget about the fact that this is a comic book character. Let's have fun with that.
Yes.
It's like, but even with our villains, even with Mahershala Ali in terms of what he did with Cotton.
Awesome.
Alfre Woodard.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, she was wonderful.
In terms of her shading as Mariah Dillard. You know, it's
amazing.
Like, you know, and Simone Missick, of course, is Misty Knight. And basically, it's been really interesting in terms of people talking about how much they love the Black female characters on the show. And I mean, it's like, I love sisters. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there have been so many different complex Black women from my family and in my life that I've been around. I feel that the Black female characters should reflect that. And also because we have incredibly strong African-American female writers on our writer-producers on our staff, like Kayla Cooper and like Aida Kroll, you know, it is the opportunity to portray Black women with a complexity and a nuance that hasn't really been done before, you know, and so like that was important, you know, and also the thing is that we also geared towards that African-American female audience because it was conscious on my point from the standpoint that Black female, when you talk about Black Twitter, Black Twitter is run by Black women. Black female tweeters, they tweet the most passionately about all the shows. And so if you have little moments of nuance in there, specifically for that audience, they're going to embrace elements of the show or discuss it. And so, like, you know, it's funny, like my wife is a member of Delta Sigma Theta. And so like having like the little, you know, Scooby versus Oob stuff in there. It's like these little stuff, you know, things that people are like, wow, I've never even seen that kind of reference in a TV show before. Like just whatever you can slip in, because culture, I think culture is the cheapest special effect.
Wow.
You know? So
culture is the cheapest special.
I like that.
That's going to be the subtitle of your segment of our class.
No, wait, we're not going to take up too much more of your time. We really appreciate what you've given
This
so
has
far.
been wonderful.
But one last question. I was just wondering how you see your role as an artist and an activist, because you're being an activist through your art. And I'm wondering what resistance looks like to you in this era. I won't speak the name, but we're in an era right now. I don't know how long it will last.
I think it's important to speak the word Trump, because if you don't speak the word Trump, he becomes Voldemort. Gives him more power.
Yes.
Okay. Like you know, like when my grandmother would talk about, you know, you know, like as if they're like this omniscient presence that if you speak the word, they're gonna appear. So you can't look at it like that. Like, I think about my grandfather. My grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. He flew the 100th Squadron. If you look on my Twitter feed, in terms of my wallpaper, that picture in the background, that's my grandfather. That wasn't something I found online. That's Well, he was a lieutenant back then, but you know, when he retired, he became Lieutenant Colonel Bertram W. Wilson. Red Tail. Thing is that when anytime I think about how tough things are, I think about him. I think about him in that photo because he was 21 years old when he took that photo, and he had just gotten back from the Berlin mission that is the finale of Red Tails, the movie. Wow. He was on that mission. And so I think about like what it would be like to be in combat being shot at. And then at the same time, understanding that all the things that he and Roscoe Brown and Lee Archer and all those guys, they knew that if they messed up, there was going to be repercussions in terms of the Black people back home. Because back then, literally, as a Black person with a college degree, the best job you could get was as a Pullman porter, or to be a butler, or to do something like that. And so they knew that this opportunity that they were given, they had to kind of push forward always and do something that would have this impact. And I kind of viewed myself as an African-American male showrunner with the same level of pressure of making sure that I create a show that makes money, is successful, where everything's delivered on time, and the powers that be are basically gratified by the show and what's accomplished. But at the same time, also knowing that, you know, I want the show itself to say something. But on top of that, knowing that if I mess it up, it's going to be real hard for brothers and sisters coming after me to ever have this level of power again.
That's for sure.
So the one thing that I always thought about my grandfather saying, he said, yeah, despite the politics, despite everything else, physics has no color. So don't forget to fly the damn plane.
Right.
And so that's kind of the thing. That's really the metaphor that I use, is that like, I'm not going to be one of these people that says, "Oh, you know, like I'm an artist. I'm not black. I'm not a Black artist." No, fuck that. I'm Black. You know. So, but in saying that, while I offer the Black perspective in art, I'm not limited by just doing that. I want the opportunity to tell any kind of story I want to tell. You know, I think I want to, like, perfect example. It's like, when you think about a movie like Trainspotting did not prevent Danny Boyle from making Slumdog Millionaire. And those movies, while similar because of how deep they put you into a culture, are diametrically opposed. What happens often with Black artists, though, is like if you make Shaft, you got to make Shaft 2. You got to make Shaft 3. You don't get the opportunity to make Age of Innocence. You know, Scorsese can jump from whatever he wants to jump into. There's nothing in silence that prepares you for Goodfellas. And so my thing is that my hope, my dream, my desire is to be as unlimited my ability to tell any story that I want to tell. And hopefully have other people that either live by my example or while I'm still in the middle of this, you know, hope that people have that same opportunity. I mean, that's why, to me, I look up so much to Ava DuVernay.
Yes.
What I love about Ava, there's a lot of things I love about Ava. Like, one is that, like, I remember Ava when she was a publicist. She was a publicist, like, around the time that I was, you know, a journalist.
We do too.
To watch her make that transformation from making a documentary to then going to features, and then going to features in a big way, and then Selma, which is such an underrated movie.
Yes.
And now getting to do A Wrinkle in Time. It's like her work ethic, her perspective, the way that she does things. I mean, it's something that we should all emulate, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's really just incredible, honestly. You know, and I think also about, you know, the examples that I've been given from my uncle, Richard Wesley, who wrote Up Kind of Saturday, Let's Do It Again, to friends like John Singleton or the Hudson Brothers, or, you know, Antoine Fuqua. And, you know, and just the various people that I've known, you know, George Tillman, people that have always looked out and that have always, by example and by direct intervention, have helped me along the way. Stan Lathan, I mean, I think what's important is that we all look out for each other and we all create the opportunity. It's hard because it's like, opportunity, people think that means, okay, it's like, well, I got a good idea, people like get greenlit. You know,
give me a job. Right?
But and I understand it. I understand it from the outside perspective and the inside perspective, because now I get a lot of, will you mentor me? Will you do this? Will you do that? And my thing is, it's like, I wish that there was a magic bullet. I really wish I could just tell you, if you add this, it's gonna pop, or if you have this, it's gonna work. I mean, what I say is not a joke, you know, because sometimes I'll speak to students or I'll speak to people and they say, oh, you know, I want to do what you do. Like, how do you get started? And I said, okay, well, you need $400. I said, $400, okay, wow, that's a very specific amount. Like, well, what do you mean by that? I said, okay, you need a $50 folding chair. You know, you might want to spend $50 on a good housing land. And then you're going to spend $300, no, what is it? $50 on the folding table, $50 on the housing land, and then $300 on the chair. And they're like, why is it so? Well, okay, I get the thing with the table on the land, but why much for the chair? It's like, because you have to sit in that thing 10, 12, 14 hours a day to get it done. Because the work is the only thing that gets done. It's like, that's why you don't see me at these parties. That's why you don't see me at these premieres. I'm always working. It sucks.
Right.
The results are great. The results are fun. The premiere is great. But the work that it takes to get it done, I mean, there are literally times when I sleep on the floor of my office. Not that my bed's not comfortable, but when I'm in combat mode, it's easier to wake up after 3 hours on a hard floor and get up and get back into writing than it is the comfort of a bed where you get up and the rest is so much sluggish.
Yeah.
That's what it takes to get stuff done. And it, you know, I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to be more organized. I'm trying to basically make myself always in the mood to write. I'm not always in the mood to write. But what I'm saying is that success looks a lot like failure, and it looks a lot like pre-success. It's hard every single time, you know, and you never, you know, to me is that the fear never goes away.
Yes.
We were just talking
about that. The fear never goes away.
We tell our students, get used to it. It just uses different voices and it has different things to complain about, but it never goes away.
One of the things here is you're so generous with your time. I would rather end back at your time than continue asking you questions.
Yeah.
Bless you. Thank you.
And also, I mean, come on, you guys together and separately are an inspiration.
Well,
we appreciate that.
We love the work. I often said I would rather fail as a writer than succeed at anything else. This is what I love to do. And we're so proud of you. We cannot wait to see what you do next.
Yes.
We'll be talking with you again, but right now, go to your family. Have a wonderful weekend, okay, bro?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You take care.
Great catching up.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, we're still here.
We're still here.
That was great. Wasn't that a great interview? He was so generous with his time. And thank you all. A lot of you are still hanging around. We really are about to wrap up. If there are a couple of quick little last minute questions, we're following the comment stream and we'll see if that pops up. But okay, here's one. How do you identify the story you want to tell? Ooh,
I think that what you do is you just get started writing. Our thing is you write a sentence every day. 1 to 4 stories a month. Just get started. Write all your ideas on a stack of 3x5 cards, and if you can't decide which one, just put them in a hat and draw one and do it. Don't let the question of what's the perfect story stop you from writing. What's important, as he said, is the work. Period. It's the work. Do the work.
And not every story will work. I had a short story due recently to an editor, and I wanted to try to write something in space, and it was just too ambitious. I don't typically write futurism in space, so I went back to what was familiar: a child narrator, which I do often, a Southern setting, which I'm doing more and more. So sometimes you have to really start, well, like they said, right, what you know, start with what's comfortable, and start with a character who has a huge obstacle that they either have to overcome or take the first step toward overcoming.
Over on the Life Writing site, we will talk about any aspect of story. We'll go into any questions that you have. What we want you to do is, when we send you the links for this, we'll be in touch with you. Watch it again, take notes, have questions. Talk to each other, share your writing, share your thoughts, share your feelings. This is about building a community, and we can do this together. Don't think you can do it alone. Don't think it has to be perfect. Perfectionism is procrastination masquerading as quality control.
That's for sure.
Get to work?
So I've already set up a picture. You'll be able to see the picture from Poomsy on the Facebook page if you want to head over there, and a picture of Luke Cage. So that should catch your eye, ladies.
Okay. There's a technical question. Is this the length of each class? They'll vary a little bit. They're probably, we're going to aim at about an hour and 15 minutes.
This one went a little long.
This one went a little long, and it'll be the same time, I think, but there will be some weeks that we miss. We will be sending out a schedule. Don't worry, you will know well in advance everything's happening. It will be this time next Saturday.
And before the end of the day, or probably sooner, you will hear from us again with the link to this broadcast, the Prezi presentation, which is more of a visual map through today's lecture, and also your homework. But I'll tell you what the homework is, because some of you are just eager and you want to know. We're going to be reading The Comet. Some of you might have read it already, W.E.B. Du Bois. It's in the Dark Matter anthology, so hopefully it has arrived by now. If not, do your best to find it. Some of my students have been able to find it online. I don't know how they're doing that, but look for The Comet. That's the only reading. Oh, Spider the Artist by Nnedi Okorafor. We'll send you a link so you can read that free from Lightspeed magazine. And also some music, Sun Ra, Space is a Place, and a couple of clips from his movie Space is a Place. Be
sure to share, after we get finished with the live class, every live class is all going online, evergreen, so people can access it even after the live. If you now see what it is that we're doing, share this with your friends. Get them involved. Not share your link, but get them to sign up for it. So because if they will sign up and they can pay some, we can then offer more scholarships. We are in the position of being able to be flexible about pricing now that we're in the black. But just share, let people know that what we're doing is for real.
Yeah, we're really enjoying the course. I love the chat stream on the side. So every week is not only just us lecturing or talking about the class materials, but you all hopefully getting to know each other, seeing friends. You can continue the conversation, like I said, on Facebook. The link is in the comment stream. And I think that's about it.
That's about it. So take care, guys. We will see you next Saturday, and I'll see you over on the Facebook. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.